Welcome to the Drachnik and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne, the producer at Drachnik and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Drachnik at Drachnik and Friends.
Hey,
Today, we're joined by Luke from Afterburn, who you may know from his work on games like Railbound and the upcoming, or recently released, depending on when you listen to this, Pup Champs. How are you doing today?
Hello, nice to be here.
Can you give yourself a little bit more of an introduction with like your path into the industry and some other games that you worked on?
Where to start, honestly, because I've been doing this for more than 10 years now. But I guess like my start into the industry was when I've had the chance to work on the prototype of a game called Superhot. That was 10 years ago. And that was sort of a lucky break into the industry because it allowed me to sort of start from a really good position, because that was a very sort of recognized prototype. And that gave me some like contacts and friends that then helped me out later. But I worked on that for a year, and then I decided to finish my university studies. So I went back, did my bachelor's, and then worked at CD Projekt for 2 years. I was working on the Gwent Witcher card game. So not on like the most prestigious project, but that actually turned out to be really nice, because when I was joining the company, I thought they're going to put me on Cyberpunk because everybody was working on Cyberpunk back then. But sort of working on the, let's call it like B project in the company, made it less like intense, but I still had access to really good mentors and people that taught me a lot. And I feel like the pace that we can have with our games that we're making, sort of that I started making after working at CD Projekt, was only possible because I worked with these really great like programmers and designers and everybody else. So it was really nice. And after 2 years, I decided that I'm actually like kind of done with card games. So I left CD Projekt, and it was a bunch of things coalescing at the same time. Like my partner, then partner, now wife, who's co-running the studio with me, sort of wanted to focus on their medical studies. We wanted to change cities. Living in Warsaw was a bit expensive. We had some money saved up, and also we've heard about some like cheap office spaces that we could rent if we go back to the city where I finished my studies, which is how Afterburn got started, sort of as a myriad of these different things coalescing at the same time. So in March 2018, we started sort of working on our own projects, sort of bumbling for 3 months with different prototypes. Like it wasn't like, oh, let's make puzzle games from the get-go. We kind of arrived there by accident, because initially we started working on like a Binding of Isaac type roguelike, but it turned out that I'm really bad at like numerical design, so that one didn't go anywhere, and some other stuff that we tried out. And then one day I was browsing some stuff and I was thinking about what could we prototype, and I had this idea for Golf Peaks that kind of just came together as a full design in my head in like within minutes. It's really weird to think about it, because like I even have like a photo of the design that I drew on the blackboard that shows sort of how the game's gonna be laid out and the camera perspective and everything. And the game kind of turned out like this, just way prettier than what I drew on the blackboard. And the main idea behind Golf Peaks was, let's try and do something that's really tiny. Like let's put all of ourselves into a project that we can finish in 3 months. Of course, it wasn't 3 months, it was 6 months. But let's do something that's kind of like our calling card, like a small game that we can show to people and say like, this is the quality we can reach. And sort of that mentality, from that mentality, a lot of the later design decisions and project development decisions even spring forward from. So one of the reasons why the game is on mobile was because we felt it's a small game, so it's going to be a better fit for mobile compared to Steam, for example. The game is premium on mobile because we knew that within 3 months, turned out to be 6 months, but still, we wouldn't have time to implement in-app purchases and ads and whatever. So we just went with premium because that was the easiest to do. And sort of a lot of the other decisions regarding the price point and the features and the content and everything just kind of sprang from that initial point. And through some like a combination of luck, because people were, even back then, were telling us like, don't do premium, it's not going to do well, it doesn't sell on mobile in 2018, and through a bunch of other stuff, it turned out to actually work out for us. And that kind of gave us the starting point of being able to sustain ourselves doing self-published games And we've been doing it for 7 years now, surprisingly.
Yeah, that's a journey. What do you think from Golf Peaks, other than like the experience of being able to ship a small game in a smaller time window? What would you say that like working on that game taught you the most?
Oh, a lot. I would say so the main thing was with Golf Peaks, we also wanted to like try out all of the different paths. So we actually released like one free game that is still available on iOS, which was a game jam game, and that kind of was our first stick at App Store, and trying out like how does the publishing process for a game actually look like? How do you upload the builds? How do you set up the screenshots? How do you set up the descriptions? So we tried it out first there, just to be able to like go through that process once before we actually start charging people for the game. And Golf Peaks was kind of like an evolution of that. So it allowed us to like test out the Steam backend and test out the App Store backend, and it taught us a lot in terms of like how do you actually get from a build on your computer to a game that people can play on all these different platforms. So that was definitely like one thing, but also like I feel like within the process of making that game and making those decisions and testing it on people and everything, we kind of found the bedrock for how the company is going to operate and our design ethos and everything. So one of the most crucial things we've done was we spent the first month on a prototype. It was ugly as hell, but the main thing about it was when we had that, we went to a laid back game developer event that we have in Poland, which is basically like a weekend of drinking and having like casual chats with people. I mean, like most gaming events, but still. And we've shown the game to people over there. It was actually like a really wild time. Like we bought a secondhand MacBook like 3 days before the event and had it shipped from like a Polish version of eBay. And as we were driving to the event, we were figuring out how to build the game to iOS for the first time because we had iPhones, but we didn't have MacBooks. So we couldn't like show the game to people unless we figured it out. So it was a wild time. And when we went to the events, we showed the game around to people in its early stage. And the game, like the reception that we've had there, sort of this informed our approach to puzzle design and difficulty progression ever since. Because the first prototype of Golf Peaks that people actually saw was sort of an antithesis of how we design them now. It was closer to Steven's sausage roll in a way, but worse, because it was like every single level would introduce you to multiple new mechanics and also introduce them via text boxes. So to us, it didn't feel bad at the time, but to everybody that sort of laid their hands on the phone, like we could immediately see them like just skipping through all the text boxes, and our faces would like turn pale as we saw like they were just not getting it. And that sort of taught us the importance of sort of going hard the other way around and trying to first like design the mechanics in a way that's approachable and that you can learn from the layout of the level and from the tools that you give to the player, but also like not introducing too many concepts simultaneously at the same time. So usually in Afterburn games, like we try very hard to sort of distill our games into like, if you have a mechanic, so for example, let's take Golf Peaks as an example, like playing a card in Golf Peaks, so moving the ball around on the grid, theoretically is one mechanic, but it's actually composed of multiple mechanics because there's card selection that comes into play. There's the direction selection that comes into play. So for most mechanics that we initially considered to be like one single mechanic, we've realized that you can actually split them further. So split them further into interactions and then try and design puzzles around teaching those interactions. So making sure that we can like and making sure that we prioritize them. So for example, like if you have a multi-stage mechanic that's like has one interaction and has a second interaction, there's like a twist on the mechanic. Like you don't need to introduce all of them in a single puzzle. Instead, let's like focus on them. And if we feel that even like just introducing it is a bit too difficult, then we usually like also try to reinforce it with like a small puzzle, like not a tutorial puzzle, but like a small puzzle that sort of plays on that concept again, so that we can see as the designers that as the player, you've realized the point of this mechanic and how it interacts with everything else. So I would say that's sort of the core learning that we got from Golf Peaks that we have been sort of crafting in our games ever since.
Yeah, I think there's a real through line there. Like you can see that focus on approachability in all of your games, I think.
Yep.
And you first picked up on that from watching people play Golf Peaks. At what point in Golf Peaks development was that? Like you said, it was a 6-month development. Like what point did you have that realization?
Yeah, I would say like it was a month in development. Like, so it was a very early version of the game. Like it didn't look great. We had like 10 puzzles total in the prototype, and we felt like, to us, like playing internally, it felt good. But as soon as we saw people actually putting their hands on it, we realized like those 10 puzzles needs to be stretched, at least in the game that we wanted to make, needed to be stretched into like 20 or 30 puzzles to allow breathing space for people to enjoy those mechanics and learn them and internalize how they work.
Yeah. And who were you testing on? Like, because I also feel like there's a certain level of like the playtest data you get is somewhat dependent on the players and the expectations of the players and the.
Absolutely, and that was like that was the even more horrifying thing, because we tested it on game developers. So we like our assumption was like, if these people have trouble with this game, then we're in a really bad place, and we need to sort of try and climb out of it. So our assumption was like, if professional designers are not like, they don't want to read these text boxes and they don't want to internalize these levels and get bored after like level 4, and they kind of just play it out of being nice to us. Then if a real player engages with the game, they're going to try and drop it even faster. So we need to, so it's not about dumbing down the game. It's about figuring out why are they having trouble interacting with the game and what can we do to make it more pleasant to them.
And how did that lead you into Invento?
So Invento was a really weird one, because so for Golf Peaks, it was always intended to be our sort of loss leader. As I said, it was supposed to be a calling card for the company, and our goal was to make zero money from this game. It was there to, like, our plan as we were starting the company was, let's produce a really small but polished game so we can show what we were capable of and do it quickly in like 3 to 6 months. And then let's spend a year and a half making the actual game that we want to make. But as it turned out, Golf Peaks did make money. And part of that was because we were scrappy and we're based in Poland, and the budget for the game was kind of laughable, honestly, at least like even to compare to our current budgets. But it made the money back. So we figured like, let's see if this wasn't an accident. Like, let's see if this is reproducible. And if we can, within the same parameters, make a similar game, not a similar game, but like, not like a clone or a sequel or something like that.
A similar scoped game.
Yes, exactly. A similarly scoped game, which is going to allow us to see if this is reproducible, but also how much we've grown within the process. Because now we had some code, now we knew how the stores worked. So we also wanted to see, like, if we give ourselves another 6 months, can we make something that's even better? And that's how Invento got born. Like about a month after we've shipped the DLC for Golf Peaks, because after we released Golf Peaks, we also did some like free DLCs with some extra levels, just to like make the game have more content, because we felt like kind of needed that. We went to a game jam and we came out with a prototype that was completely not about cooking. It was actually about textile design, but the core mechanic was the same. We've actually like changed the theme of the game during development, as we realized like textiles are probably not going to be super interesting to people. So let's try and figure out something that's more exciting. And we were really into cooking at that point, and that's kind of how it went. So that's how Invento got started. But also like during development, we've decided like, let's try and up ourselves in terms of Golf Peaks didn't have any characters and it didn't have any story. So let's see if we can try and like still give ourselves 6 months and make a similar scoped game, but let's up it a little bit by adding the story. And also one of the reasons behind that was also because Golf Peaks didn't have any characters, like mascot characters. It was really hard to market the game, because I mean, there's only so many times you can like show the golf layouts, like the grid layouts with a golf ball on it, to create like compelling promotional artwork. So this time around, we decided like, people love cats, we love cats. Let's do cats, and that's been also like the through line for all of our later games. We always have like a mascot character, because it helps us to like entice people to play the game by this like cute cat or dog or whatever.
Yeah, and how early do you try and put that in testing? Like when you're showing people, like other developers, people that you're trying to get early like design feedback for, are you making sure to have like the cute aesthetic mascot in those builds, or is it first really just trying to lock down the core game loop and core game mechanic and make sure that's good, and then figuring out what makes sense for that?
So there's like a bunch of things I could unpack here. So one of them is like the mascot is always not like a core thing. It's very helpful, and we try to like figure out something that's nice and that sort of makes sense within the context of the game. But I would say they usually come in late, and that's something we always start like worrying about more as we start showing the game to like actual players, like people who will purchase the game. In those early builds, we don't focus on the mascots that much because the story also comes in late. Like we know it's like we're happy with how it comes out usually, but it's not like a core focus for us. Like we don't have a narrative designer, for example. It's mostly like our group that's currently developing the game is sort of trying to figure out the story and how it should be, but it's not like we always focus on the puzzles first, and the rest is a nice bonus for everybody else. So that's one thing. The other thing is we test our games on peers and players and everybody else way too late in the process. Like every single time we try and like make a new game, I always want to start doing it earlier, but I also like hold myself back because I always feel like, oh, this is not good enough. Like we need to have this and this and this, and then we can start showing it to people. Whereas we should probably be like showing it as it's like really, really ugly and really underdeveloped. I feel like Golf Peaks was actually Golf Peaks and Inventor were the ones where we shown its earliest. For Railbound, it was actually like a prototype, like a university prototype. So it got iterated on before we started full production on it. But for Pup Champs, I wish we would have showed it earlier, but that one also like required the most design overhauls. Like we showed it to people a little bit, but not to the extent I wanted to. But I guess I could also add here that the thing that we are internally looking for the most in our games is something very, very elusive. It's hard for me to describe, but I know an Afterburn game when I see one. It's like we go through some prototypes and we go through some like design ideas and everything, and it's not a science. It's more like if I play a prototype or I see like a design idea for a game, then I can determine if it's going to make a good game in the types of games we are making. And we're always trying to sort of push it a little bit. We're like, as I've said, like we're not producing like sequels or like copies of our own games, but they tend to have like a similar flavor. So whenever I'm like thinking about the core design and the mechanics and everything else, I'm trying to determine like, can we make a full-fledged game out of it is one of my criteria. Like, is this just a game jam game? Like, is this a game that we can make 10 puzzles for and that's going to be it? And that's solid and it's fun, but it's not going to make a worthwhile like commercial release versus this is a game where we can actually try and expand the mechanics and create like a full campaign out of is one of like the core things that I look out for example.
And how early in the process do you usually like get a sense of like, yes, this is afterburning enough, or no, let's change direction?
I feel like for most of our titles, sort of the North Star has been if we can't get a prototype of this done within less than a month, like I would love to keep it like under a week, but like let's say less than a month, then we have no chances of making it within like 9 months, I would say. So that's been like one criteria is like the scope of the prototype sort of determines the scope of the full production. Like in an ideal world, we would probably be able to push out a prototype of a game within a week and know it's going to take us about like less than a year, like a year max to make it.
So if you're spending less time or you're taking longer than you'd expect to show people the project, how do you approach difficulty balance and onboarding and things like making sure that your games have approachable difficulty curves?
So one of the things was that we've sort of gotten a sense for it as we were developing our past games. So right now we are obviously like relying on the knowledge we've accumulated, but it's not a perfect one. Like every time we show a new game to people, we're surprised that we thought like we nailed it this time and we don't need a do-over. But it's never like this. It's always too difficult, and then we need to scale it back. But of course, like we still accumulate this experience. So when we were making Golf Peaks, we were heavily reliant on showing it to people, showing it especially to like new players, like somebody who isn't a gamer, or somebody who isn't playing a lot, or somebody who's somebody's kid, or going to a trade show and then showing it there because you get a random selection of people. Like that was very important for us. And also like doing beta tests online for people who have never seen the game before. That taught us a lot in terms of like getting a sense for what's okay and what's not. But even then, like as you're developing a game and you're stewing in your own designs and your own ideas for several months, you kind of like, you know that a mechanic works like this because you've programmed it yourself. Like our team is very small. So like you programmed it yourself or you've seen it 100 times. And so like the internal difficulty always rises. And then we need like this like validation, like this sanity check from other people to help us bring it down and realize like, okay, no, people get stuck for too long on this. Yeah, but I always wish we show it to people earlier, but yeah, it's always a tough balance of you wanted to show it to people when it's in the best quality, but you also need to show it when it's kind of like not done yet because you need that validation.
And this is maybe a good transition to start talking about Railbound, because there was actually quite a big gap between Invento and Railbound. So like, yeah, how much of that time were you spending working on Railbound? How much of that time was on different projects that didn't come together?
Yeah, so this is really funny because Invento came out in September 2019. And then we finished the DLC in January 2020. And we were very eager to start a new project after that. We moved offices to a new space. We finished renovating an apartment. And then stuff happened. And we kind of like COVID happened and we were having a really tough time transitioning into remote work. Like we just finished like moving everything and we were happy to start working on prototyping a new project. And we suddenly had to find ourselves in this reality where like my wife was newly like with a child. So that was like a bunch of stress. And then the pandemic was stress. And then trying to figure out how to work with people under those conditions was a lot of stress. So we were trying to figure out what to do first. And then we got like a government grant, like a pandemic grant for culture related stuff to do a prototype of something we've been thinking about, which was a tactics inspired, like a Fire Emblem inspired tiny game. So that kind of took our minds off the pandemic a little bit. And we finished that. It was a lot of work on the like, once you finish a government grant, then you need to like write like you need to first submit for it. So that took some time. And then once we got it, we needed to like finish the grant by like making all of these descriptions of like, oh, we spent the money on this and this, and we feel like the thing we've made has cultural value because all these things. So that was most of our 2020 was like scrambling around this and trying to figure out what to do about it. And then we had our kids, like our kid was born in November. And that kind of took the wind of our sails a lot because it was a lot. And so that was most of the gap. Like it was basically like June 2021 before we felt like we could return to like semi-normal development cycles. The rest of the time was kind of, I mean, we weren't doing like nothing. We, for example, like we put Invento on Steam. We did some like maintenance work. So it was like mostly in the back. And in June 2021, I went to this local student competition. Like we have a thing where our technical university, the one that I graduated from, has a games track where within the 2 last semesters, you spend on making 2 separate projects, one in Unity or like an engine of your choice, and the other one more like tech focused in a C++ engine that you make yourselves. in student groups. And at the end of the year, those two projects get graded in like a student competition. It's a whole thing. Like they invite people from like local and regional game development studios, and you have people coming in and grading the projects. There's like prizes and stuff. But it's also like a really good opportunity to showcase yourself to different companies. And so I participated in that as a student, and then I came back as a judge to sort of check out these projects. And one of the games I played, and I was like, this could be an Afterburn game. And of course, the prototype for that was Railbound. Like it was called Train Connector back then. So initially, like immediately, we knew like we need to change the name to something more catchy. But it was basically Railbound, but it differed in ways where we felt like we could tighten it up. So, for example, the prototype for Railbound was more sandboxy. You had a lot more like leftover rails on each level. It was like more freeform. So we felt like we could tighten it up and make the puzzles more engaging, and also like introduce some new mechanics. And especially like since it was a student project, like on the art side, we felt like we could do a lot of work, making the game prettier, making the difficulty curve better. And so we started talking to the students if they want to have us as a publisher and just give them money and come back with a game at some point, or B, just like have us sort of absorb the IP and absorb the project and release it as our game. And after some consideration, they decided to go with option B because they felt like we'll probably have a better chance of success with that. And that's how we spent the next 9 months working on Railbound. So the initial prototype took about 2 years, but it was like student 2 years, so a lot of downtime in between. But the prototype like went through a bunch of stages during that time, and then it was full production when we started development in November 2021.
And yeah, I'd love to know, like, how did you feel working on this game that is like simultaneously yours and not yours?
Yeah, that was tricky at first because I mean, it felt like it didn't spring from my head, but I didn't have a lot of trouble about it. But I sort of needed to make the game mine, or like the game ours, because it's like from the beginning we knew like we were going to rewrite it from scratch because the code base was like a student project. I mean, it wasn't the best, so we did design it from scratch. Like for example, one of the things in the prototype was that it wasn't deterministic. So like everything was kind of like spread. The logic of the game was spread between a bunch of things. And then you had a toggle.
Oh, so like the order that game components were added to the scene would affect what happened?
It was more like all of the different objects sort of managed their own logic, and it was all like time-based. And then you had a toggle for like increasing game time to like speed up the game. And if you would toggle that, the result would not always be the same. So like when we saw it, like that was a clear red flag. I was like, okay, we need to redo this and we need to redo it right. So the actual final game has like an action system where things are like very tightly controlled and you always get the same results. And that was actually like a big help because at the end we created like a testing solution for the game where you could like run like a bunch of levels in like a test suite and speed it up like 1,000 times to get the results in like 10 seconds and see like, are these mechanics still interacting correctly? Has nothing broken? And the system can withstand that regardless of the speed.
So, and then you mentioned at the top of the episode, so going a ways back, that for Golf Peaks, you went with a premium app because you didn't have the bandwidth to implement in-app purchases or ads at that time.
Yep.
What's your view on that now? And like, how has the last few years of the mobile marketplace successes or like underperformances colored that?
So what's initially started as a pragmatic decision, like you've said, like making Golf Peaks as a premium game was a pragmatic decision, a calculated one, instead of like what would bring us the most money. But we also like don't care about money that much. Like we're not in this business to extract the maximum value from our digital portfolio. It's more about creating the kinds of games we would want to play ourselves. And I'm not really playing like free-to-play puzzle games. That's not what I'm there for. So for the rest of our titles, we decided to stay premium, and also like at every step, like evaluating like we release this as premium, and if it works out, then it's good, and we continue doing that. If it doesn't work out, then we try to figure out what to do with the next game. But of course, like there's like, as when we started Afterburn, I really wanted to be able to release one game a year. Like once we got the ball rolling, I really wanted to keep that. But then the pandemic and life and everybody else, and just getting old and having less time to work compared to what we have now, compared to what we have back then. But also just as our portfolio is getting bigger, it also needs more time. Like Golf Peaks and Invento and Railbound are not existing in a vacuum. Like you still need to like take care of them once in a while, and that just eats into the time that you have. That's made the releases longer, like times between the releases are longer for us. And also like during those years, we saw the market change. So this is why we decided to go with a try before you buy model for Pup Champs, because we've been talking to developers, you for example, and some other people, and also people from the platforms. And we decided that we want to give it a try, in the sense that it is still kind of like a premium model, but with extra steps. There's like the downside is like we had more work implementing the like in-app purchase that you can use to unlock the full version. But the upside for the player is you get to try out the game before actually committing money to the game. And on one hand, like I feel like premium is still the nicest model, in the sense that it's the most straightforward transaction. You give us the money, we give you the game, and there's no other strings attached. And we never do like you pay extra for these like levels and stuff like that, or you like watch this premium ad to unlock a skin for the game. Because I'm not a fan of these solutions, but I'm very curious to see how Pup Champs does, sort of as we've sort of smashed through the barrier of you don't need to pay us up front to try out this game. Because I also feel like Pup Champs is, compared to, for example, a Railbound, is a tougher ask initially to convince people to try out this game. But once somebody plays it, they're usually positively surprised. So that was one of the decisions we've made. And also, like, the market has also changed with the subscriptions. You have the Apple Arcade. You have the Google Play Pass. Like, we've been in Google Play Pass. We haven't been in Apple Arcade, but it's changed a lot since we started releasing our games. And we're also curious to see where it goes from now.
So, talking about Pup Champ, where did the mechanics come from?
So Pup Champs is a really funny case, because this was actually supposed to be our third game. So we started working on Pup Champs right after Invento. I kind of left a little gap there, but right after we finished Invento and the DLCs, and before COVID hit, we started working on this game, because we were like thinking about. So we had a bunch of ideas bouncing around on our minds at the same time. One of them was, we really like Fire Emblem, so maybe let's try and do something tactical, because we're making grid-based games. So jumping from that to like a more tactical game with units should not be that difficult. And also something that was in our mind also at the time was, what if we do a sequel to Golf Peaks? But as we started to look into like indie sequels, it quickly turned out that you basically don't do an indie game sequel unless you're like Hades, or I don't know, The Binding of Isaac, or something like that.
Or Cosmic Express.
Or a Cosmic Express that was just announced, and you should wish this on Steam right now. But like for most indies, it only makes sense to do a sequel if you're like mega successful, or if you have a really good case for it. And even then, it's always a tough proposition. Like if you stray from the original too much, then sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's really hard to say. So we were thinking about like, what if we do a sequel to Golf Peaks, but that's not actually a sequel to Golf Peaks? So let's keep the sports theme, but instead of like, because we were thinking like, if we do a sequel to Golf Peaks, there's two main problems that we would need to overcome. One of them is you need to have a mechanic or a set of mechanics that are exciting enough to be able to show this game to people and say like, look, it's this thing you like, but different, and you should buy it again. Because if it's too similar, like if so as we were thinking about it, Golf Peaks 2 would only make sense if we would make it a game that's taking place on like a cube or something. So like you're bouncing the ball on the walls and you're changing the like perspective, because then you can kind of make the same game again, but just with a big mechanical twist that would be like super exciting to people. Because the thing that I was fearing was, if it's too similar to the original game, how do you do the tutorial? And maybe like, I think the case for Spooky Express shows me that maybe it's not such a big problem if enough time has lapsed between one game to the other. But the thing that I've always been afraid of is, how do you do the tutorial for a game that's very similar mechanically to the original game? And do you just do the same levels? Or maybe you've learned enough that you can do it again. I don't know. So we started working on a sequel to Golf Peaks that would not be a sequel to Golf Peaks, where the ball, like you have one ball, but instead of using cards to move it around, you would have units, which, well, in the original design, they had cards that you would arrange on a timeline of sorts. Like you would have these like move two steps to the right and move one step upwards and what else. But you would use multiple units and you would arrange them on a timeline to have them pass the ball between each other and score a goal using that mechanic. And that was interesting, but then we stopped doing that because of all the things that happened in 2020. And we only unearthed the project pretty much after Railbound was finished, as we were sort of looking at our suite of prototypes and deciding what would be the best fit for our next game. We actually also, like right after Railbound, we started working on another prototype that you've also played, but we haven't talked about it very publicly, except for like 2 screenshots we've shown on Twitter and in our newsletter or something about construction. But that one we've had some mechanical problems with, so we didn't pursue it further. And then we found this like forgotten football prototype and started thinking about like, okay, so how can we actually make this? And since then, it went through a lot of iterations. Like initially, the game was played in portrait modes, and the goal was on the top of the screen. In the final game, it's on the sides because and the game is landscape because that allowed us to present the game better on different devices. We've ditched the timeline idea because that was a UI nightmare, and we've just made it so that units have stamina and you have freedom over moving them. But then we've created some like mechanical wrinkles on how interacting with the ball and passing the ball changes the orientation of the players, and then added like a bunch of mechanics that we felt would interact with it in interesting ways. So from the prototype, the game turned out to be very, very different. But we still feel like it brought us into interesting places, but also that's why it's our longest development, because we sort of needed to find the game in the initial design and change it a bunch of times along the way to get to the gameplay that we wanted.
Yeah, do you like you mentioned there that like a lot of the gameplay is in those really subtle things about like what direction a character is facing is like very deeply meaningful. Is that something that you found along the way rather than being like designed in from the start?
Yeah, so for this game, that's definitely something that we found along the way, and I felt it could create interesting mechanics if we present it to players in a way that would get it, and in a way that has been the biggest challenge making this game was making sure the mechanics are understandable and approachable in a UX sense. Whereas for other games, like for Invento, like we've had the core mechanic from the start and it never changed until the end. But we've played around with the supplementary mechanics. So the like splicing the pieces into two or like copying them and everything else, that came later. But the core mechanic of you have these tiles and you place them in the box and they cover each other up, that was there from the start. And for Golf Peaks, we've also had like the cards were there from the start, the tiles were there from the start, and the golf-inspired mechanics like the water and sand tiles, all of that was in like from day one. And even the mechanic of like if you use too much strength, the ball rolls over the hole, that was in like basically from the get-go. But for Pup Champs, we needed to explore the possibility space a little bit. And so like the timeline was the initial idea like of a mechanical wrinkle where you would need to synchronize the movements of your units and pass the ball between them. But in our testing, it turned out like, it was a UI nightmare to present it to people in an approachable way. And also planning the whole sequence of events, like, for example, let's say like 10 moves ahead for 3 units was just way too much for most. Like, you needed a really good grasp of the mechanics to be able to like visualize in your mind's eye. I was like, oh, if I do this and this and this and this, then the unit's going to be here and it's going to intercept the ball and pass it to somebody else. And once you added also enemies, which was something we knew we wanted there from the start, like you can't, like it's really hard to have a soccer game without an opposing team. Then you would need to track like 6 units on the field in your head somehow. And we just decided that was way too much work. So that's when we ditched the timeline as your sort of main wrinkle / obstacle / interesting mechanic in favor of just moving units tile by tile. And then that's where we started exploring the direction instead as a sort of supplement to the mechanic of moving around and passing the ball.
Yeah, I'm personally a really big fan of designing the game such that you're simplifying the UI, like being okay saying like, oh, this is an interesting mechanic, but we can't make the UI for it intuitive and approachable. So we're just going to like cut that off. We're going to go like, no, even though it's tempting, we're just not going to explore that for the purpose of making the core interaction method simpler. I think it's a hard decision to make often, but I think a lot of the time it's the right one.
Yep. Yeah, for us, like for the longest time, the timeline felt like the most interesting thing in the game. And now, like, if we show somebody screenshots of like the timeline versus no timeline, like nobody's like, why did you want to do this in the first place? Like everybody's like, oh, this is like the new interaction system is the natural one, the obvious one. But for like months, we were like, no, this needs to be like this because this is the interesting thing about the game. But yeah, thankfully, like our team figured out that we can cut the timeline and we can replace it with other interesting stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, with relation to the mechanics relating to like which direction somebody is facing, I kind of want to coin a term, but I don't know exactly what term it would be. Like maybe like nitpicky mechanics or something. I feel like there was some of this in Bonfire Peaks too, where it's like, oh, to solve this puzzle, you need to like really understand some of the consequences of mechanics that some players might want to just hand wave or like, oh no, I get the gist. But then there's some types of puzzle, some types of mechanic where like you can't hand wave it. You need to know like the difference between like, oh, this is what happens in this situation and that is what happens in this situation is the difference between solving this puzzle and this puzzle being impossible. And I think it's a really interesting like mechanical design space that's also, I think in some ways it's a bit at odds with your overall games of like overall goals of being super, super approachable.
Yeah. And it's been something we've been like very conscious of ever since we started implementing it. And it's been the most difficult thing for us to like convey to people as they're playing the game. So in an earlier prototype, for example, all of the players were always facing left or right because that was cheap to make. You could draw one sprite and you could just flip it on the x-axis and they would be facing left or right. But once we added the direction mechanic, that's created problems because then we needed a way to convey like, oh, you're facing left as a sprite, but you're actually pointing upwards in the code. So for a long time, like we tried to play around with it, like to do like an arrow next to your player that would indicate the actual direction, and just add like UI signage to say like, oh, if you intercept this ball, it's gonna set your rotation like this with like a big arrow that would fly from the bottom of the units to indicate that direction has been changed or something. And it took us a while, and then at some point we just said like, okay, like yeah, we can't do it the easy way around. We just need to like, for all units and all animations, it needs to be like facing in 4 directions to like show clearly like the unit is facing this way, and make like really clear shooting lines and passing lines to make sure that we convey this information because it's crucial. And I feel like if we wanted to spend like extra like 2 months on it, we could probably still like make an even better implementation of this system, like UX wise and code wise and animation wise. But also at some point you need to say like, okay, this is probably going to be good enough because we don't want to be making this game for like 8 years.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. Did you try a version where players could literally only be facing left or right, which would, I guess, be like equivalent to towards the goal or away from the goal, and so they could only shoot left or right?
I'm pretty sure that we've tested in the form of levels, like levels that would block you and wouldn't allow you to do it the other way around. And I think that some might even be in the game itself, where like you're still passing left or right, but at some point it became clear that you want to utilize this space because it just creates more interesting stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I'm always really interested in this kind of like design decisions about like what the core mechanics are and like how just a small change can have like really interesting long-term ramifications.
Yep. I've said at the beginning that I don't consider myself to be great at numerical design. So Pup Champs uses like very simple values, like the shooting ranges are usually like within 1 to 4 tiles. But I still feel like we could probably still play around with these values and create very different games. So for example, like one of the units shoots a long pass that's like 4 tiles away. But if he was shooting 3 instead of 4, that would create like a very different experience already, even with such a small change.
Yeah, totally.
As we wrap up, do you have any questions for us?
So something that's been on my mind as you're sort of a very recognizable mainstay in the puzzle game space, something that's been on my mind lately was we've seen the puzzle game genre sort of open up in different new ways over the years. Like it felt like there's these waves that come in, like match threes are really hot right now, or like hidden object games are really hot right now or something. And now it seems like detective games and deduction type games are really like doing really well these days. Like where do you think the puzzle game space, and I know it's a really broad space, but where do you feel that it's going to go in the future in terms of like all these genres, like subgenres happening and like old classics coming back, but in new forms?
Nothing but soccer ban until the end of time.
Yeah, Alan Nostradamus. If we knew we would be making business decisions based on the roadmap.
I was hoping for this hot scoops.
Yeah, everyone.
I mean, we've talked about it. I mean, like in relation to the kind of games we make, like I know how to design a certain type of game, and if I tried to design a detective game, it doesn't matter if like that's a hot genre. I don't have the brain like that doesn't fit with my experience. So if I was looking at the trends and going like, oh, we should do one of them, we could try, but it would probably be bad.
I don't think it would be bad. I think that you could make a decent detective game. I don't think that you could make a detective game that is great in the realm of detective games in the same way that a lot of other Dragnet games are great in their specific spaces, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think
but if we ever become a 2-game studio, then we could just get Murray churning out detective games and
yeah.
Becoming a 2-game studio was our dream for a long time, or at least my dream. Like I really wanted to have like 2 projects happening simultaneously, but like not shipping simultaneously, just kind of staggered.
Yeah,
we didn't pull it off.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing, especially with a very small team. I think that detective game is a very identifiable trend right now. I think that over the last 5 or 6 years, the actual trend is game that rewards player by making them feel smart no matter what the actual difficulty is without turning off a lot of players. I think that like really it's been a lot of approachable games. And
I feel like
specific.
you're throwing some shade at me right now.
No, honestly,
No, your games are super approachable.
Yes.
I'm throwing shade at some of our games.
Mhm.
I honestly think that like a lot of the current detective game lineage basically goes overdid Golden Idol and then splinters off into like 20 different directions.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the biggest successes of Case of the Golden Idol is the way that it
The UI.
the UI, yes, but like specifically the way that the UI very delicately balances your like making sure that the player feels like they're in full control, but also makes them feel like they're a genius for solving it, even on like tutorial puzzles, right? And
Mhm.
it's not making the player feel
Stumped.
frustrated, feel like like what Alan was saying earlier about like, well, you didn't understand this edge case, so you're literally not going to be able to solve this puzzle unless you understand this edge case of how this mechanic worked. And like Bonfire Peaks is a great example of a game that has a lot of those, and I think that there is definitely a place for those, but like not as much in the mainstream. I think that like when you look at a lot of the mainstream games, it is games that make people feel like they are putting everything together on their own and are very approachable in doing so. I think Blueprints is another recent good example of that.
Oh,
Um,
I love this game so much.
yes, this is the thing. This is part of why everyone loves it. I think that like Outer Wilds is a great example.
Mhm.
It's especially with the one more run nature of both Blueprints and Outer Wilds. Like it is like minimizing frustration at the at the time it's taking you to solve the overall mystery or like get to the bottom of a puzzle solution by putting up an artificial sort of roguelite style barrier in front of you to say like, no, it's okay. This is the way the game is going to work. We're going to pull you out of this, and then we're going to have you approach it again, and then we're going to have you approach it again, and then we're going to have you approach it again. And in doing that, it's actually like, I don't know. It's a really smart way of analyzing this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I feel like you're onto something with even like the recent successes, like, well, not so recent now, but I mean, like Patrick's Parabox is a game that I consider to be like exceptionally well laid out in terms of difficulty progression. And it showcases you a mechanic that's interesting, but could be potentially like you could make a Steven Sausage Roll version of Patrick's Parabox where
Easily.
every single level just like breaks you. But that's not that's offered. What's offered is a 300 puzzle, like super smooth playthrough. That's really nice.
And that's harder to make than the Stephen Sausage Roll version.
Potentially.
It's easier to make something this hard. That's
True.
That's how I am pretty much about all of this.
True. That's a very good point.
Any other closing thoughts on that, Ellen?
No, I think that was bang on.
Awesome. Do you have any closing thoughts, Luke, before we wrap up for the episode?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was really nice chatting with you.
Of course.
Yeah, great to chat to you, and good luck with the launch.
Thank you. Hope it does well. You can get the game on Steam or wherever it's most comfortable to you.
Yes, you're very busy, May.
It'll be Steam, iOS, Android.
Yes, on launch definitely Steam and Windows and Mac versions on both on Steam, and App Store and Google Play. We love itch.io, so we'll probably be on that, but maybe not at launch because we have like our hands are full at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are the main platforms, and we'll definitely come to Nintendo Switch as soon as we figure out how to do the ports.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be the first time we do it in-house, so that's going to be fun.
Oh, hopefully. Nice. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you for listening to the Drachneck and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoise.bandcamp.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.